They say karma has no deadline. But for Reese Miller, a woman who had spent 40 years on her feet, serving coffee to strangers, it felt like the deadline had quietly passed her by. At 62, alone, and exactly 3 days away from being homeless, she sat on her rotting porch waiting for the sheriff to arrive and place her belongings on the curb. So when a sleek black Phantom Rolls-Royce rolled onto her cracked driveway, Ree didn't think of miracles. She thought the police had come to arrest her, and she was wrong. Because the man who stepped out wasn't a cop at all, but a ghost from 2009, holding a ketchup-stained receipt worth $40 million. The beginning of the story of how a $6 grilled cheese sandwich changed history. A story that started on November 14, 2009 at 11:15 p.m. when the rain in Akron, Ohio didn't wash anything clean but only made the grime slicker. The sky bruised plum-colored as freezing water pounded the asphalt roof of the griddle. A roadside diner on East Market Street that permanently smelled of burnt onions and floor wax, where Reese Miller checked the clock for the 4th time in 10 minutes. A buzzing neon circle humming louder than the refrigerator. Adjusted her apron with strings biting into a waist thickened by 20 years of eating food meant to be thrown away. Feeling 50 at 32, her blonde hair pulled back with a fraying scrunchie and orthopedic shoes, the only expensive thing she owned. When a voice grated down her spine like sandpaper red, Big Ed Kowalski, the owner, a man shaped like a thumb with a temper shorter than his neck, snapping at her from the back booth as he counted the lunch rush till with greasy fingers, prompting her raspy, "I'm on it," as he sprayed blue disinfectant on the laminate counter and wiped away sticky coffee rings while her mind stayed fixed on the pink eviction envelope from her landlord. Mr. Henderson, cruel in color and message. 2 months overdue after her ex-husband Gary vanished 3 weeks earlier with the savings, the TV, and even the toaster, leaving her with a maxed-out credit card, a broken radiator in November, $14.50 in tips, and a $600 deadline by Friday. The diner empty except for Old Man Jenkins nursing a 3-hour coffee. The jukebox silent, rain drumming against the plate glass and the grill sizzling as Arthur, the silent chain-smoking cook, scraped carbon buildup, while Reese stared at the window's blurry orange streetlight streaks and felt not just poor but invisible. A Waitress people looked past to see menus, a hand refilling water instead of a human with a story, until Ed shouted he'd close early and dock her pay, prompting her muttered, "Understood," as she pressed her forehead to the cold glass and prayed to a long-ignored God for anything. A busload of tourists? A generous drunk only to open her eyes to 2 small shadows detaching from an alley wall, moving like stray cats, splashing across a 4-lane road through ankle-deep puddles, resolving under the neon dino sign into 2 children. A boy of 12 or 13 and a girl no older than 7. Underdressed for Ohio in November. The boy in a hoodie 3 sizes too big with soaked sleeves dragging. The girl in a buttonless denim jacket and pajama pants tucked into rain boots, hesitating beneath the open 24 hours sign as the boy pulled her hood up, whispered something Reese couldn't hear, and with terrified determination pushed the door open so the bell jingled cheerfully for the 2 ghosts drifting in. Wind scattering wet leaves across freshly mopped linoleum as the diner's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Reese freezing mid-wipe as the boy immediately stepped in front of the girl to shield her, his face mapped with grime, dirt, grease, and dark streaks that looked like dried blood, smudges of dirt, grease, and something dark that looked like dried blood streaked the boy's cheek. But his eyes were what stopped Reese cold striking. Piercingly blue, intelligent, filled with a feral alertness as he scanned the room with quick precision, checking the exits, checking Ed in the back, checking Arthur at the grill, before speaking in a voice that cracked between childhood and adolescence. We need a table," prompting Ed to look up from his money and squint, heavy brows furrowing as he didn't see children at all but liabilities, mud on his floor, non-paying loiterers. And he barked, "Kitchen's closed," even though the grill was clearly still hot. Snapping, "Beat it," making the girl flinch and shrink behind her brother. Clutching a dirty stuffed rabbit by the ear. Her skin gray, not pale, but gray, her lips blue. And Reese felt a sharp pang in her chest, the maternal instinct she'd tried to bury since her miscarriage years ago. So she dropped the rag, walked around the counter, and said low and firm, "Ed, stop it," before turning to the boy and telling him the kitchen wasn't closed and they could sit anywhere. Watching him study her carefully, searching for a trap, then nod once and guide his sister to the booth farthest from the window, deep in shadow, while Reese grabbed 2 menus and a pitcher of water, her hands shaking slightly as she approached, and was hit by the smell of damp wool, unwashed bodies, and the metallic tang of fear. Pouring 2 glasses as she said, "Here," the girl grabbing hers with both hands and draining it in 3 seconds, so Reese refilled it immediately, murmuring, "Take your time, it's warm in here," only for the boy to say abruptly, "We don't have much money," reaching into his soggy hoodie pocket to pull out a clattering handful of quarters, dimes, and sticky pennies. "We have $3.40, as Reese looked at the pathetic pile that wouldn't even cover a burger. Hearing the girl whisper for the first time in a dry leaf voice, "I'm hungry, Leo," and the boy whisper back, "I know, Mia, I know," pushing wet hair from her eyes and promising they'd get something. Breaking Reese's heart as she scanned the menu and saw the cheapest item was of $4.50 grilled cheese with fries extra, while Mia pointed to the picture and said she wanted the $8.95 cheeseburger platter, forcing Leo to look from coins to menu to Reese as pride warred with desperation until he said, "She have the grilled cheese." "Just the sandwich, I'm not hungry," though his stomach growled loudly in the quiet booth and he flushed red, staring down while Reese closed her eyes and thought of the pink eviction envelope, the $14.50 in tips, the gas she wouldn't be able to buy, the 3 miles she'd have to walk in the rain. Then looked at Mia's blue lips and Leo's protective hand over his sister and forced a smile she didn't feel, saying, "You know what, you guys are in luck, it's Tuesday. Tuesday is kids eat free night, special promotion." Management's idea, making Leo suspicious because he hadn't seen a sign. So Reese lied smoothly that it had just started and promised they could have burgers, fries, hot chocolate. Mia's eyes going wide as she asked for whipped cream, and Reese promised double. Until Ed's voice boomed across the diner as he waddled toward them, demanding to know what Reese was doing, sneering that there was no kids eat free night and asking who she thought she was. Charity, causing Leo to stiffen and slide out of the booth between Ed and Mia, his hand diving into his pocket so Reese feared a weapon before it clenched into a fist, while Ed sneered at the coins and barked that $3 wouldn't even cover the heat and told them to get out before he called the cops, prompting Reese to step in front of the table 5-4 against Ed's 6-2, fueled by a rage she hadn't felt in years, as she snapped that they were customers. They were ordering food, they couldn't pay, and she was paying. Slamming her entire night's tips, crumpled 1s and 5s onto the table beside the coins and declaring it $15. Enough for 2 burger platters and 2 hot chocolates. Telling Ed to sit down and let her do her job. Freezing the diner into silence as Arthur poked his head out, Jenkins stopped sipping coffee, and Ed's face turned a dangerous purple before he swiped the money into his pocket and spat that fine. But if they made a mess, she'd clean it with her toothbrush, and not to expect more shifts because she'd just bought herself a 3-day suspension. Stomping back to his office and slamming the door hard enough to rattle napkin holders while Reese stood there breathing hard, knowing she'd just lost 3 days of pay rent money, and that this was the end. She was definitely getting evicted now. And she turned back to the kids to find Leo staring at her with an intensity that was unsettling. He didn't look grateful. He looked shocked, and when he quietly asked, "Why did you do that?" "You don't know us," Ree answered, her voice trembling slightly. "I know you're hungry. Sit down. I'll get you hot chocolate," then went to the kitchen where her hands shook as she scooped the cocoa powder, tears prickling her eyes as she blinked them back and told herself not to cry. Not in front of them, before carrying out massive burgers, piles of steaming fries, and mugs of cocoa overflowing with whipped cream. Watching as they ate, not eating, inhaling with frantic speed, as if the food might vanish if they paused. Ketchup smeared all over Mia's face while Leo ate half his burger, stopped, wrapped the rest in a napkin, and shoved it into his pocket despite Ree gently telling him to eat it all and offering to make another to go. Only for him to look at her and say they couldn't pay her back and her to answer that she didn't ask them to. And when they finished 20 minutes later and the rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, Leo stood, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, helped Mia down, and Mia whispered thank you as she hugged Reese's leg, smelling of rain and dirt with the sweet scent of cocoa underneath, while Leo stood before Reese looking older now that he had eaten, reaching into his pocket so Reese thought he was pulling out the wrapped burger, but instead producing a small folded piece of paper, torn from what looked like a diary, and pressing it into her hand as he said, "Take this," explaining it was collateral, introducing himself as Leo Vance and Mia as his sister, saying they were going to find their aunt in Chicago and that he never forgot a debt, ever, brushing off Reese's protest that it was just a burger by fiercely insisting it wasn't just a burger, that she had saved them and nobody ever saved them, before grabbing Mia's hand and urging her to move before the blue car came back. And just like that, they were gone, the bell jingling and the door swinging shut, leaving Reese alone in the diner with a dirty table, an empty apron, and a suspension that would cost her her home. As she looked down to see the paper, wasn't a diary page at all, but an old creased Polaroid of a beautiful woman standing beside a distinct vintage 1960s Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud with "Property of the Vance Family Trust. If found, call 5,550,199, scrawled on the back. A number she never called because she didn't think it was real. Tucking the photo into her pocket, finishing her shift, walking the 3 miles home in the rain, losing her apartment 2 weeks later as the years from 2010 to 2019 became the lost decade in which karma never came and gravity dragged everything in her life downward, beginning with her being fired 2 weeks after feeding Leo and Mia via a note taped to her locker accusing her of theft, followed by homelessness through the winter of 2010 in her 1998 Ford Taurus behind a Walmart, where she learned the rhythm of homelessness, the art of washing hair in McDonald's sinks, layering socks to keep toes from turning blue, and the humiliating invisibility of food pantry lines, scraping together enough by 2012 to rent an uninsulated converted garage and work at Patty's Pancake House in polyester uniforms for quarter tips as she aged not gracefully, but through erosion, her knees swelling permanently from concrete floors, until a free clinic doctor diagnosed severe osteoarthritis and recommended a $40,000 surgery she could never afford, leaving her chewing ibuprofen like candy to survive shifts, all while keeping the Polaroid as it followed her from car to garage to a mold-smelling basement apartment in 2015, where she tacked it to a mirror, watching the image fade to sepia while the number remained uncalled, whispering to it on sleepless nights that she hoped Leo made it to Chicago and got his hot chocolate, never believing the trust was real but keeping the photo as proof she was a good person and had once saved someone. Until 2020, the breaking point. Then came the pandemic for the world. And it was a tragedy for Ree. It was a death sentence. Because Patty's Pancake House closed its doors in March 2020 just for 2 weeks, they said, and then it never reopened. And Ree was 60 years old with no computer skills, no savings, and a bad back. Applying for unemployment only to find the system clogged, Checks lost, delay after delay. Burning through her meager savings in 3 months, until she stopped buying meat, stopped buying fresh vegetables. Her diet shrinking to rice, beans, and discounted bread. Taking odd jobs where she cleaned houses for people too afraid to let her inside. Scrubbing floors while wearing a mask that made it hard to breathe. Walking dogs for wealthy families in the Heights. Dragging her painful legs up and down hills for $10 an hour, never enough. Until by 2023, she moved into a dilapidated rental house on Miller Road. A shack really, with rotten wood siding, a roof that leaked into buckets when it rained, and a porch that leaned dangerously to the left. But the rent was $600 and the landlord, a slumlord named Mr., didn't ask for a credit check. And she survived just barely, like a swimmer treading water in the middle of the ocean, waiting for her muscles to finally give out. Until present day, October 15th, 2024. When the end didn't come with a bang, but with a certified letter as Ree sat on her porch. The only part of the house that felt somewhat peaceful. Staring at the paper in her hand while the autumn wind stripped leaves off the oak tree and sent them, skittering across cracked concrete. The notice to vacate, saying Mr. Gorski had sold the land and a developer was coming to bulldoze the row of shacks and build luxury condos, called the Miller Road Lofts, giving her 72 hours. And Ree looked at her hands, gnarled now. Skin paper thin and spotted with age and hard work, 64 years old. Saying aloud, 72 hours, her voice rusty, with nowhere to go, the car long gone. Sold for scrap 2 years ago when the transmission died. No family, parents dead, no children, no friends. Poverty isolating, and shame keeping her from anyone from her old life. Standing up only for her left knee to buckle, so she grabbed the railing. Biting her lip against crying out as pain like a sharp hot knife twisted in the joint. Limping inside to a sparse house with a mattress on the floor. A card table with one chair, a hot plate. And scavenged cardboard boxes, packing quickly because when you have nothing, packing is quick. Packing 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, her Bible. The ceramic cat figurine from her mother. Then coming to the mirror where the photo was tucked into the frame, curled and humidity-stained. Taking it down and clears throat, looking at the handwriting on the back and whispering, "Leo Mia, I'm sorry, kids, I guess I'm the one who needs saving now." Thinking of throwing it away. Thinking if she hadn't given away that money or stood up to Ed, maybe things would have been different. Maybe she'd still have her job. Maybe she'd be a manager by now, but unable to do it. Tucking the photo into her pocket beside her inhaler. Until October 17th, 2024, the final afternoon. The deadline 5 p.m. and the time 4:15 as Reese sat on the front steps with 2 boxes beside her. The house empty, keys on the counter. A plan of sorts to walk to the Samaritan house. Downtown, knowing it was first come first served, and if beds were full, she'd be on the street. Rain starting again in a cold, miserable drizzle, just like that night in 2009, as Ree closed her eyes under a heavy, crushing weight on her chest that wasn't a heart attack but despair. Pure, unadulterated despair, thinking she had worked hard every single day of her life. Been kind, been honest, and this was her reward. Sitting on a rotting porch waiting to become a statistic. Thinking maybe she should just stay and let them bulldoze it with her inside. A dark thought that felt comforting because she was so tired. Until she heard it. Not the sound of a normal car, but a low, powerful purr. A deep, resonant thrum vibrating in her chest like a lion clearing its throat. And when Ree opened her eyes and looked down the muddy, pothole-ridden street, she saw a vehicle that looked like it had driven out of a movie screen. Black, not just black, but a black so deep it seemed to absorb the light around it. Massive, with a front grille like the entrance to a bank vault. The Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament gleamed silver against the gray sky. A Rolls-Royce Phantom moving slowly, prowling down the street and dodging potholes with an eerie grace that made it look alien. against the peeling paint and chain-link fences. And Ree watched it, mesmerized, thinking drug dealers or maybe the developers coming to inspect their new land. Until the car slowed, crept, clear's throat, past the house next door. The turn signal flashed, Reese held her breath, and the massive car turned into her driveway, tires crunching over broken concrete as it stopped 10 feet from her porch, the engine cutting and leaving behind a heavy silence while Reese stood frozen, gripping the handle of her cardboard box so tightly her knuckles turned white. Then the back door opened, and instead of a suited driver, a young man stepped out from the rear passenger seat. Tall, well over 6 feet, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit beneath a long black overcoat. Dark hair slicked back, sharp angular jawline, powerful, wealthy, like he owned the entire city, opening a black umbrella and walking toward the porch with dress shoes, splashing heedlessly into a mud puddle, stopping at the bottom of the stairs to look up at Ree. And when she looked into his eyes, the breath left her lungs because they were blue, piercing, intelligent, striking blue eyes, the same eyes that had scanned the diner for exits 15 years ago. And he didn't smile as he looked at the boxes beside her and the eviction notice taped to the door, his jaw twitching before he reached into his pocket, not for a wallet but for a small tattered object wrapped in plastic, slowly unwrapping it to reveal a dry, half-eaten cheeseburger bun, petrified by time and hard as a rock, holding it up as he said in a deep, smooth voice that he believed he still owed her for the other half of this. And Ree stood with a hand flying to her mouth, whispering Leo, and the man finally smiled. Not the guarded, terrified smile of the boy in the hoodie, but a smile of triumph as he said hello, Ree, that he brought the car just like he promised. And at 4:30 p.m. on October 17, 2024, rain drummed rhythmically against the roof of the Rolls-Royce Phantom, while inside the silence was absolute. The car a sanctuary of hand-stitched leather and walnut wood, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and new money. Ree sitting stunned in the back seat with her dirty cardboard boxes in the trunk and her rough, trembling hands resting on the softest leather she had ever touched. Leo Vance sitting across from her with long legs crossed as he poured her water from a crystal decanter and gently told her to drink because she looked like she was in shock, her teeth clattering against the rim as she asked how, and Leo's sharp corporate mask slipping away to reveal the boy who once guarded his sister in a diner booth. As he said, it was a long story, but now they had time, finally leaning forward to ask if she remembered the name on the back of the photo. The Vance Family Trust, and when Reese nodded, he told her it wasn't a fantasy, that his father, Richard Vance, owned Vance Logistics, one of the largest shipping companies in the Midwest, that they lived in a mansion in Shaker Heights and had everything until his parents died in a private plane crash in 2008. Drawing a gasp in sympathy from Ree, before Leo explained the worst part, was his uncle Marcus, executor of the estate, who was supposed to care for them until Leo turned 25, but instead tried to erase them because he wanted the $60 million trust fund he couldn't touch as long as Leo and Mia were alive and in his care. Hiring a fixer to take them to a remote Montana boarding school for troubled youth where he planned to have them declared mentally incompetent. A chill running through Ree as Leo simply said they ran, that the night they came into her diner, they had been on the run for 3 weeks. Hitchhiking, sleeping in barns, hiding in truck stops, truly starving after being turned away from 3 restaurants, one owner even threatening to spray them with a hose, and that when they walked into her diner, he had a knife in his pocket and was ready to use it. Prepared at 12 years old to kill anyone who tried to hurt Mia, until he said softly that he didn't have to because she didn't see thieves or trash, but children, feeding them, standing up to Ed, and giving them her own money before reaching into his suit pocket, pulling out a sleek black smartphone, tapping the screen, and turning it toward her to show a live video feed. A beautiful young woman in a white coat was walking down a hospital corridor, confident and radiant, and Ree whispered, "Mia," only for Leo to correct her with a proud smile. "Dr. Mia Vance." explaining she was a pediatric surgeon at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore who saved kids every single day because she remembered what it felt like to be helpless. Then turning the phone off as he told Ree they made it to Chicago that week. Found their Aunt Catherine, who took them in, hired the best lawyers from Baker McKenzie, and fought his uncle for 5 years until they got everything back, the company, the house, the legacy, while Uncle Marcus was now serving 20 years in a federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. And Ree wiped a tear from her cheek saying she was so glad and that she had prayed for them every night, while Leo admitted with years of regret that they looked for her but didn't know her last name. Only Ree, returning to the griddle in 2012 only to find it gone. Burned down in an insurance fire with Ed disappeared and records destroyed. Private investigators unable to find her without a surname or social security number, until Ree gestured to the car and asked how he found her, and Leo said it was the photo. Explaining that last month he did a Forbes interview about his shipping empire and described the Polaroid and the Waitress in Akron in detail. Pausing to say a nurse at the free clinic on 4th Street read the article and remembered a patient with severe arthritis who carried an old Polaroid of a Rolls-Royce in her purse and called his office 3 days ago. And Leo leaned back, steely, saying he flew in from London that morning and came straight here just in time to see the eviction notice, telling Ree firmly she wasn't homeless anymore, but that before they left, he had business to attend to. And at 4:55 p.m. on October 17, 2024, a beat-up Ford F-150 rattled down the street and screeched to a halt behind the Rolls-Royce as Mr. Gorski, the thick-set landlord in a stained windbreaker smelling of stale cigar smoke, stepped out with 2 younger men in work boots, staring at the Rolls-Royce, the chauffeur, and then Reese's porch before shouting whose car it was and that he had work to do, until Leo stepped out without an umbrella, letting rain hit his expensive suit as he calmly but terrifyingly addressed Mr. Gorski, who faltered and insisted the eviction was legal at 5 p.m., while Reese stood behind Leo feeling small but unafraid as Leo repeated the word law. Pulled city records showing no certificate of occupancy since 2018, citations for black mold, faulty wiring, lead paint, and illegal rent collection for 6 years. Gorski bristling until Leo stepped closer, naming himself Leo Vance, owner of Vance Global Logistics, threatening lawsuits for illegal rent, reckless endangerment, emotional distress, and fraud, prompting Gorski to retreat and claim the developers were coming, only for Leo to snap his fingers, receive a folder from his chauffeur Thomas, and announce he bought the development contract an hour ago, canceling the Miller Road lofts, owning the land and the house and effectively owning Gorski, who deflated when he realized Leo bought the whole block for her, was ordered to leave, and fled with his men in the truck, while Ree stood on the wet pavement with rain and tears mingling, as she looked at the rotting house that had been her prison and asked what Leo would do with it. And he answered with satisfaction, "Burn it down. I'm going to bulldoze this shack and build a community center here, a place where kids can get a free meal without anyone asking questions, and we'll call it the Reese Miller Center." Leo said, and Ree shook her head, overwhelmed, telling him she couldn't, that it was too much, that she was just a waitress. But Leo turned to her and grabbed her hands, his grip warm and strong, telling her she was not just a waitress. She was the woman who saved his life for $6, who invested in him when the whole world wrote him off, and now he was paying out the dividends, opening the back door of the Rolls-Royce again and telling her to get in because they had a flight to catch. A flight to Baltimore, because Mia was waiting and had cooked dinner and promised hot chocolate with double whipped cream. And Ree looked back one last time at the street where she had almost died of loneliness, then at the man who had returned from the past to save her, whispering, "Okay, let's go," and as the car pulled away, sliding silently through the rain, Reese Miller left her poverty behind forever. But the story wasn't quite over, because Leo Vance had one more stop to make, one that would bring everything full circle to the man who had started it all, Big Ed. And at 5:45 p.m. on October 17th, 2024. The Rolls-Royce didn't head to the airport, but wound through the darkening streets of Akron into a gray industrial district. Ree asking where they were going as she wiped rain from her face with a warm towel Leo had given her. Leo answering one loose end and saying he had done his research and found everyone, including Edward Kowalski, making Ree stiffen as she asked if Ed was still alive. Leo replying that he was, but life hadn't been kind to him. And clears throat. The car pulled up to a drab brick building behind a high, chain-link fence with peeling letters reading Sunnyvale State Assisted Living Facility. A place that looked nothing like the sun and very little like living. A warehouse for the forgotten. And when Ree asked why they were there, Leo calmly said he bought the place that morning. That the conditions were deplorable and he was going to renovate it. Hire real nurses, improve the food. But there was one resident he wanted her to see. And inside the smell of ammonia, boiled cabbage. And despair hit her instantly, the smell of poverty she knew too well. Elderly people in wheelchairs staring at a flickering television. And in the corner, a withered man at a card table. His bulk reduced to sagging skin and bones, bald, age-spotted, unmistakably Big Ed. Shouting at a nurse about his dinner while Reese approached slowly with her cane clicking on the linoleum, and Leo walked beside her like a shadow. Ree greeting him and Ed squinting before recognizing her and mocking her appearance. Still bitter and cruel, until Leo stepped forward. The gold Rolex on his wrist, catching the light. Explaining she wasn't there for a bed, but to say goodbye. That she was leaving to live with him and his sister. Ed confused until Leo leaned down, introduced himself as Leo Vance. Reminded him of the night 15 years ago, when he and his sister walked into the diner starving with $3 and were called trash. Explaining that Ree paid for their meal, gave her tips, saved them. And because she did, he survived and built a company and became a billionaire. The word hanging in the air as Ed's face drained of color, while Leo finished by saying Ree was the only reason Ed wasn't being thrown out onto the street. That he had wanted Ed to feel the cold, and then Leo straightened up. But Ree told me in the car that she forgives you. She said, "You are a sad, lonely old man, and that punishment enough as being you." Reyes looked at Ed. She didn't feel anger anymore. She just felt pity. "Goodbye, Ed," Ree said softly. "I hope you find some peace." She turned and walked away. "Wait," Ed called out, his voice cracking. "Ree, wait. I didn't mean it, Reyes." But she didn't turn back. She walked out of the smell of ammonia and into the fresh cold rain where the luxury car was waiting to take her home. October 17th, 2024, 9 p.m. The flight was a blur of comfort Ree couldn't have imagined. A private Gulfstream jet, a hot meal served on china, a seat that turned into a bed. When they landed in Baltimore, a limousine was waiting on the tarmac. They drove for 30 minutes to a gated estate in the countryside. The house was massive. A sprawling Georgian manor lit up against the night sky. But it wasn't the size that mattered to Ree. It was the person standing on the front steps. A young woman stood there. She had the same dark hair as Leo, but her face was softer. She was wearing a thick wool sweater and jeans. She wasn't wearing shoes. She had run out in her socks. The car stopped. Ree got out. Mia, the woman, burst into tears and ran down the steps. She collided with Ree, wrapping her arms around her in a hug so tight it threatened to crack Reese's ribs. "You're here." Mia sobbed into Reese's shoulder. "You're actually here." Reyes held her. She smelled the same clean soap and rain. But she wasn't a shivering child anymore. She was a strong, beautiful woman. "I found you," Ree whispered, crying freely now. "I always wondered." "We never forgot," Mia said, pulling back to look at her. "Not for a single day." "Look," Mia pulled a necklace from under her sweater. Hanging from the gold chain was a small, cheap plastic charm, a tiny hamburger. It came with the kids' meal. Mia laughed through her tears. I kept it. It was my lucky charm through medical school. Leo walked up beside them, smiling. I think we should go inside. It's freezing. They walked into the house. It was warm. A fire was crackling in the massive stone fireplace. And there on the coffee table was a silver tray. On the tray were 3 mugs. They were oversized, steaming, and piled high, impossibly high, with whipped cream. Double whipped cream, Mia said, wiping her eyes. Just like you promised. Rhys sat down on the velvet sofa. She took a sip. It was sweet, warm, and perfect. The pain in her knees seemed to fade away. The fear of the eviction notice, the hunger, the loneliness, it all dissolved in the sugar and the warmth. She looked at Leo sitting in the armchair. She looked at Mia sitting on the rug at her feet. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She wasn't a charity case. She was family. Rhys Miller didn't just survive, she thrived. With access to top-tier medical care, she got her knee replacement surgery. She spent 3 months in physical therapy, and for the first time in 20 years, she could walk without pain. She didn't want to just sit around in a mansion, though. Leo tried to tell her she never had to work again, but Rhys was stubborn. She took over the kitchen of the estate. She didn't cook for the family. They had a chef for that. But she started baking. She baked cookies, pies, and her famous apple strudel. Every Sunday, she and Mia would load up the SUV and drive to the local children's shelter. They didn't just drop off food, they served it. Rhys stood behind the counter, not as a servant, but as a grandmother figure to 100 kids who had no one else. Leo kept his promise too. The Rhys Miller Community Center opened in Akron on the site of her old shack. It provides 500 free meals a day. Above the door is a plaque that reads, "Kindness is the only investment that never fails." Rhys often sits on the patio of the manor looking at the sunset. She still keeps the Polaroid of the Rolls-Royce in her wallet, right next to a new picture, a photo of her, Leo, and Mia laughing at a graduation ceremony. She realized that the luxury car wasn't the reward. The money wasn't the reward. The reward was the love that came back to her, multiplied 1,000 times over, proving that even in a dark, rainy world, a simple grilled cheese sandwich can still save a life. And that is the incredible story of Rhys Miller. It reminds us that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever truly wasted. Rhys gave everything she had, her last few dollars, and her job to help 2 strangers, never expecting a dime in return. 15 years later, the universe paid her back in a way she could never have imagined. It makes you wonder, how many miracles are we creating right now just by being kind to the people around us? If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button. It really helps us share these positive messages with more people. And if you believe in the power of karma, type "kindness matters" in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that inspires. Thanks for watching and see you in the next.